Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast. I'm your host, Nate Goss. This is part 2 of Libertyville Celebrity Spotting, where we have local history librarian Jenny Berry back on the podcast to talk about some celebrities over the years who have made appearances in the town of Libertyville. If you missed part 1 of Libertyville Celebrity Spotting, I encourage you to go back into our archives and give it a listen. That episode ended with the year 1942, and that's basically where we pick it up here in this episode. So let's head on over and continue my discussion with Jenny. Welcome back to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast.
Hi, Nate. Good to be here.
It's been a while since we did part 1.
Right.
But would you like to just real quickly recap what it is we're talking about here as far as local history goes and what we're talking about today?
Sure. Well, every once in a while when I'm in the microfilm newspapers, I come across so-and-so was in Libertyville today or so-and-so is coming to Libertyville. And I've collected those over the years, and we talked about 3 of them in our last podcast. We're going to talk about 3 more today. Now, these are not people that lived here and became famous. These are not people who came necessarily to visit family that was still here. These are people of some national stature that visited Libertyville for one event or the other.
Mm-hmm. They were making an appearance,
exactly,
in a way. Who were some of the last people we talked about, in case listeners want to go back and seek out that part 1?
Sure. So we started as early as 1845 with Sojourner Truth. Mm-hmm. We also talked about Commodore Foote and the Fairy Queen, who were brother and sister little people who were actually frequent visitors to Libertyville, not just as performers, but as friends of local people. And then also Jimmy Cagney, who came in 1942, the actor, for a World War II bond drive.
But we're actually going to be starting off, it sounds like, pretty close to where we ended. Let's keep the ball rolling. Who's the next celebrity appearance in Libertyville?
All right, so this is just 1 year after Jimmy Cagney came in 1942. Our next person came in 1943, also for a war bond drive, and this was Helen Keller. Helen Keller was an American author, a disability rights advocate, a political activist, and a lecturer, and she became the first blind-deaf person to effectively communicate with the sighted and hearing world. Some people might remember the movie Miracle Worker, starring Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke, which was a fictionalized account of a young Helen Keller and her teacher, Annie Sullivan. So Helen Keller lost sight and hearing at the age of 18 months due to illness, and then went on to do great things. So in September of 1943, she came to town to encourage people to buy World War II bonds to support the war effort. She was, according to the newspaper, going to be accompanied by the Women's Army Corps, or people might know that as the WACs, who were from Fort Sheridan and the Fort Sheridan Post Band. And then there was going to be a parade that came through downtown, followed by a rally in Cook Park. Unfortunately, poor weather forced the event to be relocated to the Jackson Gym at the high school, which people will remember as the old Brainerd building.
Right, so not the high school now.
Not the one today.
Yes, the old building.
Right, the old building was still the high school at that point. She was a guest of John F. Allen, who was vice president of Brinks Express Company, which was like an armored truck company. He had a farm, which is about where the Walmart is today in Vernon Hills. A very successful event. It raised $177,500, which in 2023 dollars is about $3.2 million. And the big thing about Helen Keller is there's actually a local woman who's in her 90s who was a high school majorette at the time that Helen Keller came to visit.
In her 90s now, like
she's
alive
now,
and well.
And she's still alive today. And she will tell you when Helen Keller came that Helen Keller approached her and asked to be able to touch her majorette uniform. Wow. And so this local woman was actually touched by Helen Keller in 1943.
That's incredible. I also think it's really cool that, so she was staying at this farm that was close, like you said, close to where the Walmart is in Vernon Hills. So we actually have sort of a celebrity appearance throughout our entire district. Almost.
That's true, from north to south.
That's very cool. And Helen Keller is just such a great figure in history. I feel like kids today even, they just love learning all about Helen Keller, it seems like.
She just is unique.
Yeah, so great. All right, so Helen Keller in 1943. Who do we got next?
All right, we're going to skip ahead a couple of decades, and we're going to talk about Betty Ford's visit in March of 1976. At the time, she was First Lady, wife of President Gerald Ford, and she came to visit specifically Lamb's Farm. One of her platforms was mental health and helping those with mental disabilities. And she was visiting Lamb's farm to have a private tour of the facilities with, of course, press along, but it was not a meet and greet the public type of event. She was there to dedicate the first residential building on the property at Lamb's farm, which had just started up within the last couple of years then. And she was being given the Lamb's Good Shepherd Award. Now, her visit wasn't without a little bit of controversy. Some in the press questioned the timing. So when she was here, it was just 4 days before the Illinois primary in which her husband was running for election. The press secretary said, no, this is the type of trip she would make anyway, but it did coincide with a big Gerald Ford rally that was being held at Buffalo Grove High School. So they were both in the state to drum up business.
Sure. You wonder, so did they even come together? Like, did they come as a big group or entourage, or was it just sort of like they're both doing their own thing and they, coincidentally just kind of end up in the northern burbs here at the same time? Or?
Well, I know that Buffalo Grove was a big Republican location. So is Libertyville as well.
Yeah.
I don't remember in the reading that I did any strategy around it, or whether the two events were even connected in the press. I just know that they happened at the same time.
But your point's well taken, though. I mean, this was a cause that she was very passionate about,
was.
And Lamb's Farm is, it's great that she was able to come and visit that. When you're talking about these, what the press said or what the newspaper said, what newspaper would we be talking about at this time?
Sure. So at this time, it could have been the Independent Register. It might have been the Daily Herald. This research is done from our clippings file here at the library, so it's a mix of materials. But generally, those two newspapers, the Independent Register and the Daily Herald, will be the main coverage of that point.
That they're doing the reporting of this.
Yeah.
All right, and then sounds like we've got one more to spotlight here.
Right. So the biggest one that people who live here will still remember, many of them were at this event, was in October 1960 when presidential candidate John F. Kennedy came through town and stumped out on the front steps of what is now the Cook home, but at the time was the library building.
Wow.
He was on the presidential campaign trail. The election was just a week or so away.
So this is absolutely a political visit.
Oh, completely. Yeah, he was barnstorming, basically. Coming there. And he came from O'Hare Airport to Libertyville. Then he was on through Mundelein, heading off to Lake Zurich, Barrington, and other suburbs to the rest. So it was really, if you think of the old train, like whistle stop tours, he was not a train, but it was pretty much come in, give a speech, get back in the car, and go off to someplace else. Now, Lake County was strongly Republican at this time, so a Democratic candidate coming through is something.
Well, he must have calculated that that there was some chance that he might be able to win the county or some of the districts at least. Or yeah.
What's interesting is the next day, Chicago Tribune reported that the reception in Libertyville was, quote, almost as chilly as the day. But you'd really be hard-pressed to tell that from the photos in the newspapers. So the estimates of how many people vary on who made the estimate. So the Republican estimate said there were only 4,000 people. The Democratic estimate said there were 10,000 people in the park. The local newspaper split the difference and estimated 7,000 in attendance.
That's good, solid journalistic instinct there. Just split the difference and land somewhere near the truth there.
Definitely. So, I mean, the pictures, it looks very enthusiastic in the pictures, although you can see in the photos a few Nixon signs in the crowd and one that says, Jack, go back.
Yeah, well, that's politics for you, right?
People
that's what he was there for.
Given their opinion either way. He came with Illinois Senator Paul Douglas and Illinois Governor candidate Otto Kerner, as well as his sister Eunice Shriver. Kennedy's sister Eunice Shriver was with her as well. The newspaper said that Cook Park was a mass of color with red, white, and blue posters and signs, and a Kennedy banner was hanging from the pillars of the Cook Library, now the Cook home.
Is there a photo of that someone could look at if they wanted to?
Yes, there are some photos online through the Historical Society's Libertyville History section of the Illinois Digital Archive. There are also plenty of newspaper clippings in our files here at the library that people could come and look through.
All right, perfect.
And also, not a part of the Historical Society or the library collection, somebody has posted on YouTube a video of Kennedy giving the speech out on the Cook home.
Really?
There's that one. There's also a second one on YouTube that shows more of the kind of visit through different suburbs. So you can see his car arriving, driving up through Cook Park and him getting out and speaking, and then he goes on to someplace else.
Well, we might as well, we'll put those in the show notes. Why
Yes.
not? Let people just look at those show notes on this episode and look at those videos if you'd like.
It's very rare that we have video or know of video of actual events, so this is a big one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So despite the big turnout, the presidential election, just 2 weeks later, Libertyville did vote in favor of Nixon by about 200 votes.
It was a good attempt.
Yes.
Kennedy. It was nice of him to stop by.
It was.
All right, well, so you just spotlighted and showcased 3 additional celebrities that came and graced Libertyville with their presence. And so this has been a lot of fun. I just want to thank you, Jenny, for sharing all this great research and information you've done.
You're welcome, and I definitely invite people to come in and take a look at the clippings files on these or other topics that we have. A list of them is available on the local history page. Look at the subject file list, and you can see the over 900 local history clipping files that we have here in the lower level.
Definitely. We will definitely add that in the show notes. So check out those show notes because we'll have quite a bit of great links that you can use to dig into all this on your own if you want to. All right. Well, thanks again to Jenny for sharing all that great information and local history with us. Make sure you do visit that local history page on our website, www.cooklib.org. And while you're over on that website, make sure you swing by our blog, Shelf Life, where we blog regularly about the books that we've been reading. We offer some genealogy tips. We share local history stories and so much more. You can find that blog at shelflife.cooklib.org. And we also welcome your comments, your questions, your feedback on the podcast. You can send those messages anytime to webmaster@cooklib.org. And before we go, I just wanted to send this one little request, and that is that if you enjoy this episode, please tell others around you about it and let them know that they can catch this episode and any past and future episodes of the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast in Apple Podcasts, in Spotify, or wherever they like to get their podcasts. And if you're feeling extremely generous, please take a moment to rate us. Those ratings do help us get new listeners. This episode of the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast was recorded in Digital Studio 1 at the Cook Park Library in Libertyville, Illinois. Visit the Digital Studio page on the library's website to learn more about how you can use the studio spaces at either of our libraries. That's going to do it for us now. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.